I thought our guys put in a good week of work. Obviously, 11th game of the year, you got a lot of film on them. Also, they have a lot of film on us, so I've been very conscientious about our guys, about what we've shown on film. You should expect them to try to take advantage of the things they can and stay away from the things that they feel is our strength. So I thought it was a really good week of practice, also with our coaches. A couple of injury-wise, I think Malik is borderline, right? He did some things today. A lot of us see how he happens tomorrow. Joe Barnum won't be with us, but we did pick up a couple guys. Demetrius John has been good, and actually Daniel Brown has practiced this week, so we expect Daniel Brown, and I think he could give us some stuff in really unique, special situations. So excited to have him with us. With that being, I think that's all of the injury guys, if I'm not mistaken. But excited to go to Rutgers, and tremendous respect for Greg. I think it's a great Big Ten game. Obviously, their season to win 4 out of the front, and they're a little bit banged up, and then to play the way they had the last 2 weeks. Obviously, a very good football team playing on all cylinders. So excited for the opportunity to open up for questions.
What do you see from Rutgers now that they're healthy? It looks like Ethan's settling in.
Yeah, obviously the quarterback has played a lot of football. He hadn't played it there, but he's played a lot of football. You can tell he's very comfortable in the system. I think they do a lot of things to put him in a good position, but also the running back obviously is a very talented player and does a variety of different, not a lot of schemes, but a lot of different approaches, a lot of different formations, some window dressing, but a really good football team physically on offense. On defense, they kind of do what they do. They're a little bit different this year and maybe years past, some of the variation in coverages, but up front they pretty much stay with what they are.
Your running back, Josh, is really good couple weeks here for him. And I know you talked about your relationship with him and him being your first guy, but you never seemed to pivot away from what you thought he could do, even with the injuries. What's it like for you to see him find this again?
Again, I go back to, I think relationships with high school coaches matter, right? And Jed Kennedy was the guy that first reached out to me. I had a guy, Melvin Gordon, who was a really good player for me at Wisconsin, that, as soon as I got the job here, he called me and said, Bret, this is one of your kind of guys. And I think what he was telling me then was, he's known me for a long time. He knew who Josh was, and he was like, this guy's going to be everything you want him to be. And I think the great thing about Josh is just his resiliency. Obviously a very talented player, physical. I thought those 3 touchdowns on Saturday kind of personified Josh. The first one with the bounce out type route down the end zone, and the last one, the dive over. Like, we really don't practice that or hadn't repped it, right? But he knew where he needed to go, and that's a matter of a player taking it into his own hands. And then I just really think the way he interacts, I think in the running back room, and really for us in the wide receiver room, a lot of times you see that's where maybe there's some some me guys, and dissension times if somebody's playing more than others or whatnot. And in our wide receiver and our running back room, the way Coach Stepp and Coach Ward have molded that room to play together has been pretty awesome.
How hard is that to do in this day and age, to mold that together?
I think very hard, and I give a lot of credit to those guys, to our coaches, but also I think our program, when you walk the halls, I think our building, builds a certain, we're getting down to the crunch here on a couple guys in recruiting, right? Like guys that I know some guys may be committed to other places, some guys might be considering between 2 or 3, and one of the things I always say when a recruit comes in this building, right, if we have to tell you what family means, we didn't do a good enough job, right? Everybody has a roster. Any roster can be Googled. You can look it up, right? High school, college, NFL, and they give you basic information, height, weight, maybe your major, your hometown, your coach, all this stuff. But the things that you can't find on Google are the things that are in this building, right? The family, the feel, the vibe, what we're going to do for you in the highest of highs, but we're also going to do for you in the lowest of lows. And I think those rooms kind of make that jump out to me even more.
Coach, you got part of the college football playoff rankings this week.
Uh-huh.
How does it make you feel to know that room, they're talking about you?
Well, I had a feeling it was there, just because, I think I got a good pulse on where we are in college football. I know when we lost the Minnesota game, that was probably going to knock us out of that first one, right? I think if we hadn't, we'd probably be in the top 15 right now. But you got to play the schedule and play the results, right? And I thought our guys have done a really good job of understanding whatever happened on Saturday, the best thing we can do is take advantage of this week. And it probably gave us a little juice in the middle of the week, but I think our guys are focused on Rutgers, a team that they've seen win 2 back-to-back games, a team that plays football the right way and has a lot of similarities the way we do things. So it's an exciting contest. But I'm not going to ignore or oblivious to the fact that it's brought attention to us, right? Like even just media-wise, I get all of a sudden contacted a lot more where it's at from a national perspective. Got literally texts that night from people that are involved in college football on the highest levels about how excited they were to see Illinois in there. So I think those are exciting things, and definitely heard from the recruits.
Josh, Brett, Kevin Wigginton and Alec Bryant went through your senior night, senior day ceremonies. They have more eligibility, so what was the significance for those two to go?
Well, even just if you go back 2 years ago, Keith Randolph, Julian Pearl, like we've had probably a dozen guys since I've been here that just, and here's what I say, hey, if you want to walk, walk. Like there's no penalty for walking twice, right? But I think guys that have multiple years of eligibility, I've had some conversations, but we're just trying to get through these next 2 weeks, then we sit down and have a conversation. I think there's certain guys that I'm not oblivious to the fact that college football is a little different right now. Maybe there'll be guys that, we have, in my opinion, 3 different type of scenarios happening. You have guys that, are playing at high levels that could jump to the NFL, guys that are playing at a level that maybe they're going to look to explore other opportunities, or guys that, that we maybe not even know about that are looking for someplace other than here. And I think that's just college football. I'm always anticipating it, always aware of it. We'll have conversations in the appropriate time, but if a kid wants to come to my office next hour and say, this is what I'm thinking, then you got to have those moments. I think that's probably how the world of college football has changed more than ever.
It's been a tough experience this year with Gentle Hunt, Brett. I talked to T-Rod. He just said the whole year he's just been, just tell me how I can help because I love it here. I'm so appreciative to be here. He seems like he's that kind of kid.
He is. I've been very impressed with him since, I saw him on film, loved what he was, and we got to know him a little bit. When he came and visited, his dad was going through a little bit of it. I actually saw awesome last week to finally meet his dad, which I thought was a pretty cool moment. And just very impressed with who he is. I think it took him a while to adjust to how we've done things here, right? I think kids that have been in programs for so long, they get ingrained that that's the way it's going to be everywhere. And now he sees what's happening here. He'd also tell you probably levity. There were some things I thought he could do better away from here, right? And I got on him about that. So it's been a growing moment. I really love his demeanor, his personality, his attitude. I think T-Rod is a great example of a guy that, waited a little bit before to kick it in high gear here. And I think Gentle sees that, and I know T-Rod shared that with him.
Yeah, we talked to a couple of guys on that note yesterday, and Alex Capka-Jones and Gentle Hunt and some others. It feels like when they haven't been getting playing time, they've stayed engaged and avoided the discouragement. Is that something that you've developed in your head coaching career, the ability to keep those guys locked in?
Well, I think every day in our building, you're either building or tearing down a relationship. I mean, it's just that plain, right? I mean, it's not just with our players, but with your support staff, your assistant coaches, right? Like I think today's world is so now driven. But I think, tip the cat to Alex Capka-Jones. He's a kid that his recruiting story was very unique. To get him to come here, audition for a scholarship, get it. I actually thought he was going to play his first year here. I think he had to go through some things adjustment-wise, so he redshirted that first year. This year to stay the course, obviously brought in Zakari, so I know he right away, he came up to me, he's like, Coach, I love Zakari. He's taught me a lot about the game. So I think guys don't look at it as discouragement, they look at it as encouragement. Hey, let's take advantage of the moment you have. And I thought last week to get that 3rd and long call to Capka-Jones, A, the confidence in Coach Stepp to put him in there, B, the confidence in Luke to throw that ball, and then the results of it. I literally just went back and forth with Cap last night. I'm like just so proud of him, who he is, what he represents. I told him he leads the nation in yards per attempt on 3rd down plays, right? Just trying to take a positive spin, but really impressed who he is. And I think the last 2 years, you look at Casey Washington a year ago, and you look at Pat Bryant this year. Pat's been a good player for a number of years, but he's obviously taken his play to a different level. The NFL scouts that come through here, the way they're talking about Pat, about where they see him in this year's draft, is just dramatically increased from where he was a year ago. So I think it's a great indicator. Hey, you just need 1 year of playing really good football, and you can be amazing to see what things happen. T-Rod Edwards went from a guy last year who was Denzel's backup to now a guy that people are talking about drafting. I mean, those are really cool moments.
In 2012, you had like a Wisconsin team that had like 600 yards against Nebraska. Like you'd run the ball all the time. Did you ever think in 2012 like you'd be running like a spread offense, a tempo kind of offense? Did you
in 2012?
Yeah, like would you be surprised that in today's world you're running like a spread offense, tempo offense?
I get the question, but I think what I've always done is I had to play to my players' strengths, right? And in that offense, we had 3 running backs with Melvin Gordon, James White, and Monty Ball, who like it was pretty easy to get those guys involved in the game, right? A triple-headed monster. That was actually our 3rd quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, that started that game that year. So we were struggling with the quarterback rotation. Some guys got banged up. I knew actually Bart Miller was my offensive line coach. I switched out my offensive line coach after game 3 of that year after Oregon State. So we literally switched our offensive line coach. We played Nebraska earlier in that year, lost maybe by a field goal, had rushed for less than 100 yards, and then lo and behold, 8 weeks later in a rematch game, we rushed for 500 and beat one by 70 or whatever it was. I've always tried to play to our players' strengths. It is very easy to see in this year's offense. Luke is a very talented, dynamic player, both running and throwing. We have 2 perimeter receivers who could probably be 2 of the better pair of tandem perimeter receivers that I've had in my coaching career, but also in the slot, like Hank Beatty and Colin Dixon have really continued. I thought Tanner Arkin to have those 3 catches last week are really, if you truly line them up, Josh McCrae to start that first game, it was Aiden Lawfrey, Caden Fagan, and then he was probably the 3rd back, right? And now he's the featured guy that got 3 touchdowns last week. It just speaks volumes about our character.
Awesome.
But your secondary, we've seen a lot more juice in Clark in recent weeks. And what do you like about how the depth is emerging and the rotations kind of shaking?
I couldn't be happier for Jaheim. He's another guy, kind of not maybe in the same conversation, but like a guy like Kapka coming in and having his moment gentle. Jaheim has been a steady build. He's been doing really good for us in a very specific role on special teams, and then really, if you remember back to the Oregon game, we got catastrophic injury at the corner position, and Jaheim went in there and just battled his tail off. It wasn't always pretty, but he was really competitive. He bit a hole through his mouth and just kept playing, and he's truly one of those guys. Every day out there at practice, he's competing. He has more conversations with himself before noon than most of us have all day, right? Like, he's always talking to himself about what he's got to do and how he's got to do it. And I would tell you, as players and coaches, there's probably not a more well-liked kid on this team, and it speaks very well about what he's going to become.
Thank you, guys.